our schedule of like, let's see how you like this.
Yeah.
And they handled it incredibly well. And I'm glad you brought up Will Gholston. For whatever reason, I don't think he gets as much attention as he deserves. And he's now one of the longest tenured
second
Bucs.
after Levante.
Yeah, that's incredible. And has had to do so many different things as the defense has changed in those years.
Yeah, and let me rewind that a little bit. He's a second tenured Buccaneer now because he was drafted in 2012, and that was his first 2 years were Greg Schiano years. And he was drafted specifically to fit into that defense that they were going to do, to play the role that he's playing in that defense. And if you remember, back then the Buccaneers were also very good against the run. And this defense, surprisingly, I know everybody thinks that Todd Bowles brought in a strict 3-4 defense, but it's not the absolute 3-4 that you think of the Pittsburgh Steelers throughout all the years. It's really like most defenses, multiple fronts. There's when they're in over or under, lots of times it really looks a lot like a 4-3 front, and it just happens to be extremely similar to what the Bucs were running in 2012 and 2013. And Will Gholston was drafted to fit that defense, so he's loving what he's doing in this defense. He's actually trying to make sure that he stays bigger as well. He says he's making an effort to stay above 300 pounds, so they obviously want him to be a rock in the middle. And Coach Rogers was pointing out that whenever the opposing team to try to run power runs to the power side where the tight end is, that was Will Gholston's job, and he really held up well against that.
Wow, I love that. That's great. Well, as we are talking about the defensive line, it is a perfect time to meet our newest addition, the rookie, Khalil Davis.
Growing up sports, playing with my brother was hard. We were very hard on each other because we knew how good we were, and we knew how good we can play. And if somebody wasn't playing to that level, I just be in his ear like, you got to pick it up, and it would piss him off. He would do it to me and piss me off, and then we'd play harder. So it was hard. Like, it was either you got to toughen up, just got to be tough. And we made each other tough by saying those certain things to each other. For me and him, it was always just a competition level. We kept getting higher and higher. And I think at one point we just reached a level where it was just past everybody. And it was just a level that me and him would just go with each other, and it just kept getting higher and higher as we got older. We got stronger and faster. So it just helped us raise our game and play to a different level. I have 2 older sisters and just me and Carlos, so 4 kids. But we didn't really know we were adopted until we were like 10, and my parents sat down and told us. And to us at that time, it didn't really mean anything. Like, we were like, okay. And then just went back to what we were doing. But, as we got older, we could start to see things, see we didn't look like a lot of our family. And, but we were never treated as, adopted kids. They were treated us as we were family. And that's the really good part of love of my family. They treated me and Carlos like we were blood to them. The biggest thing was never quit anything that you start, and if you did, it was on you, and you had to, you would have the regret for that. But another thing was, for sports, for me and Carlos, it was you got to be extraordinary. And they would always say there's a lot of guys like you who are better than you, just as good as you. So you got to find a way to be extraordinary. That was always just the motto whenever we did sports or any type of different sports. I think I can bring an aggressiveness, bring a lot of speed to this defense, and from a D-line perspective, I got a lot of speed and creating problems for those inside tackles and guards in the center. So I think that's what I can bring to this team. My biggest goal going into this year is just showing what I can do, and showing myself that I can hang with the best of the best, and just showing that I belong in the NFL. Proving to myself that I can do this, and showing everybody else what I can do.
All right, everybody, welcome back. Obviously, it's been a long time since we've been together. We've got some new faces, all right? I'm not gonna go through all the introductions like we normally do on this day. COVID testing. Now, man, this is part of life, all right? When you embrace this and realize this is our only chance of winning. Commitments and obligations this year are different. We got a mask on, don't we? Let's face it, dude. We ain't the Bucks. We're 80 motherfuckers looking for a job. Get one of them. We're gonna have our ass ready to go to New Orleans. They're allowed to pump in noise now this year. So you know what that's gonna be like in New Orleans. Just like as they had their fans. Trust. You can't trust anybody if you don't look in the mirror and trust that. Is the guy in the mirror doing what it takes? Loyalty, faithful adherence to a cause. What's the cause? Win the world championship. That's it. We ain't got but so much time this year. It's different. Respect. We gotta respect the process. Coming to work every day, getting that day's job done. Honest to God, I looked out there today. I've been in this league 27 years. I've never seen so much talent on one field.
Welcome back into Training Camp Live, presented by Publix. This worked out great because we were actually planning on talking about the kick return competition, and it's sort of partially happening behind us right now. So we can go and swing on over to that camera and show some of those guys doing the punt return. So what did you learn from who you saw being over there, and what was happening of who all's in the running for the punt return in particular?
Yeah, the drill here is actually what they're actually focusing on, and I'm not saying move the camera, but what they're actually focusing on is releases at the line of scrimmage, and that's important for guys like I saw Chappelle Russell and Cousin Daniels and guys like that getting reps there. But if you look back there, you will see some guys that are getting opportunities to catch the ball. They're not trying to return right now, but that's the first thing you have to do is prove that you can catch the ball if you're going to be a punt returner. And there is a guy back there that I didn't think to include when we made a little graphic of possible punt and kickoff return candidates, and that's Tyler Johnson, the rookie out of Minnesota. And he had been hurt for a little while and just got in towards the end of last week back into practice. And see, there's some guys that I thought we should focus on, and Tyler Johnson isn't in there, but I guess we need to include him because, as the camera just showed, he's one of the guys back there. Coach, obviously Ray Calais, the 7th-round draft pick, part of the reason you drafted him is because he's got good kick and punt return possibilities, and that could be his way onto the roster. I hadn't thought about Keyshawn Vaughn in that role until Coach mentioned it on Friday, because he was asked if Vaughn would be ready for to have a big role in offense in week 1, and Coach said, well, probably if anything, it would be he could win the kick return job. So he's an option there as well. We have Dario Gumbawali up there because he's done it before. I've actually had Scotty Miller up there as punts. He didn't really get a chance last year in games, but all throughout the year he was one of the guys in the rotation, as he is now fielding punts, and he was asked about that the other day and said if he got the opportunity, he would absolutely like to have that job. He just wants the ball in his hands. He likes that. Yeah. And then Antoine Winfield Jr., another rookie, so 2 rookies out of Minnesota who could factor into this. Coach made a specific point of saying Antoine Winfield Jr. was a candidate in the punt return job. Now, he's not back there right now. They probably have him doing some other stuff on special teams, but he's got a shot. And then I guess you see that's 15 is Cyril Grayson.
Yes,
who's very, very fast.
We were talking about Tyler in that shot. People were probably like, wait, was that number 10? Yeah, it looked like Tyler Johnson has his jersey kind of scrunched up where it looks like a 10. So, no, we do not have 2 number 10s. Yeah. It's just kind of scrunched up, and that's who that is back there when it looks like it's a 10. You can see on the back there, that was a better shot of it being Tyler Johnson over there. So,
yeah, we really wish these guys would wear their jerseys in a way that helps us.
Yeah, I know, right? Why is that not their priority?
You can see a lot better from behind. There's Scotty, obviously.
Yeah, why is that not their priority is helping us? I don't understand. So looking at the return game last year for both kick and punt return, who all has returned, who we lost, all of that, and what do you feel like is the potential outcome for that? Do you feel like it could be improved this year? Who are some of the guys that could be vying for that spot that weren't there last year?
That's a good question. And obviously, TJ Logan was your kickoff returner for 3/4 of the season and your punt returner for a part of the second half until he broke his thumb catching a punt. That's not ironic. I wanted to say ironically, catching a punt in practice. And then he missed the last 3 or 4 games, and so the Buccaneers used different guys in that period. And so he probably came into this camp as the guy that would be in the lead for probably both of those jobs. But unfortunately, we saw that he got hurt the other day. Coach hasn't really specifically addressed the specifics of his injury, so that's not something we do here is speculate on injuries. But it is true that he was taken off the field and has not been back in practice yet. So if he is out for some period of time that, potentially the entire season, then the Bucs are back to like sorting through options. And I think that the 2 rookies are really probably high up on the list, Calais and Vaughn.
Who are some of the guys that it could be potentially problematic for them that they are not in the running for this in terms of making the roster, that some of these guys that are out here that could, really be earning themselves a spot by the fact they can do their normal job and also be a return person? Who could that maybe put on the bubble because they're not up for that?
I guess it would depend on how much they're using Calais. We're looking at punt return right now, not kickoff return, and I think Calais is probably a better option on kickoff returns and punts. But if he could win both jobs, that would help him, and I didn't see him in the rotation today. So I think he probably needs some sort of special teams role to, if not make the roster, to at least be active on game days. But, when, as Coach pointed out, and it's very true, the kickoff return job is actually a lot less important these days than the punt return job because there are just so many touchbacks. And lots of times all the guys we saw it many, many times with our TJ Logan last year. His job was to stand at the goal line and wave his arms and the ball went over his head. The punt return job.
I can do that job if they need me to.
And as soon as they see you back there, they're going to kick it short and make you catch it.
Yeah, that's true.
So the punt return job, and also it's a more difficult job, punt return. Kickoff return, the trajectory that the ball's coming in is easier to catch than a punt, and also you really have an opportunity to see what's in front of you a lot more than a punt returner who's basically staring straight up at the sky and has to catch it and then immediately find his bearings and see where the tacklers are coming from. So to me, it's a much tougher job. It's one that has a lot bigger room for error, and like I said at the top of this, the very first thing you have to prove is that you're going to catch the ball.
Right. Yeah.
Every time.
Yes, that is the key. That is the most important part. And it worked out well that Tyler Johnson was over there because we'd actually already had a question on Facebook just asking how Tyler Johnson is doing overall. We mentioned that he had missed some of that time.
I bet you that's our friend Travis, who's been out here to practice a lot. Not this year because of the good friends with Jason Light.
I don't think it's that Travis.
You don't think it's that Travis?
One. Yeah, I think it's a different one from what I can
I thought
tell.
there was only one Travis.
Yes, there's only one.
Travis Tritt and then our friend Travis.
Yes.
So I got off on a little Travis.
So how Tyler Johnson is doing overall after coming back from his
Well,
injury?
I mean, the main thing is that he's back in action. He was missing time, and that wasn't good, especially for a rookie, especially in this situation. Coach says he's way behind, and that's not an insult. It's just fact. He's way behind because of the time that he missed and the fact that he didn't get any offseason work. So he did mention one very nice play that Johnson made on an inside-out route in the first practice that he was back for. So, I guess he's got to take his opportunities to show up and make some noticeable plays here on the practice field, but he's got a ways to go, unfortunately for him.
All right, and just a reminder that we are going to be taking questions from YouTube and Facebook in our last segment. So make sure you're heading on over to one of those if you're not already watching there to be submitting your questions. We're going to take a quick break here and as always show you our shots of the day from our amazing team photographers. Enjoy.
Happy birthday, Mike. Thanks for stealing my touchdown.
Happy birthday, Mike.
Happy birthday, Mike. Buddy Mike, happy birthday, my boy.
Love you, baby.
Happy Get Live Day, Mike.
Happy day, buddy.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Mike.
Happy birthday, 1-3.
Happy birthday, Mike.
Happy birthday, Mike. Happy birthday!
My boy, my boy, 35th birthday.
man.
You know, man.
Big time.
Thank y'all.
My
Love
boy
y'all.
been there about 20 years in.
Love y'all.
You know what I'm saying?
I need my hair rebraided. Hey, giving a birthday shout out to the GOAT, Mike Evans. Happy birthday.
Happy
and love.
birthday, Mike. Happy birthday, Mike.
Happy birthday, Mike. Love you. All right, what color you want? Happy birthday, Mike.
Welcome back into Training Camp Live, presented by Publix. Casey Phillips and Scott Smith here. It's time for our final segment, and it's great. We've actually got all these wide receivers working on some routes right here behind us, so nice, good view of them that we can show everyone. And again, if you want to get a question for us here in this final segment, do it on YouTube or on Facebook in those comments, and we'll start off with one from Keith, also known as Big Nasty, one of the big
Keith Kunzig.
one of the big Bucs fans here, asking which rookies do you think could be potential starters as of now?
Well, Tristan Wirfs, obviously he's expected to be the starting right tackle. He's getting the right tackle snaps on the first team, pretty much all of them. And again, there are training camp rules about what we're allowed to reveal, but Coach Goodwin did say that, so it's cool for us to pass along that Tristan Wirfs is playing first team right tackle right now. So assuming that he has enough time to be ready for game one, he should be a starter. They have Joe Haig on hand if just in case. And then I would think the only other one that probably is likely, at least near the beginning, is Antoine Winfield, but he's got quite a battle on his hands with guys like Jordan Whitehead and Mike Edwards. And they're all young guys and recent draft picks, but the other two at least have some experience in the system. So he's a guy that Coach said would compete for a starting job quickly, so that's why I add him in. I don't think the rest of them, while they might make some contributions, are probably likely to be starters, though. I wanted to also point out it's too bad that our guys are so shy about that camp cam, huh?
Yes, the camp cam is the best thing ever. We're going to have to keep doing that even post-COVID.
Yeah.
I love it. The guys are really getting into it, and we just have such a great group of guys with great personalities. It's not surprising at all. Dave asked, how is Justin Watson doing in camp so far?
Oh, Justin Watson had an awesome start to training camp. He's a little leaner on purpose. A lot of our guys have been working on bulking up for this year, but he was a guy who went a little bit in the other direction, and I guess that probably has had something. There he is. Wow, good job. I guess that has something to do with him looking pretty fast. He was clocked one day. He was the fastest guy that they clocked. They got those harness things on, that catapult system, and it really keeps track of a lot of metrics. One of them is, the speed at which guys are running, and so they can tell you at the end of practice which guy reached top speed, and he was over 21 miles per hour on one play, and that's fast. I mean, when Mike Evans clocked that the other day, he was actually kind of boasting about it in a funny way. So obviously that's good for Justin to show that kind of speed. Now, the way it is with receivers in camp is every single year certain guys show up, and then at the first week you're raving about these two guys, and the second week you're raving about these two guys, and that happens every year, and you start to think, we've got so many receiver candidates, how are we going to pare them all down to 5 or 6? But what you don't see a lot of times is consistency from beginning to end of training camp. A guy that has a fast start but stays with it and doesn't sort of trail off. And I'm not saying that has happened to Justin Watson, but that's what he needs. He needs to take that fast start and continue with it throughout camp and not just be the guy that had the fast start. And I think he can do that. I think he can. And it's exciting because he really didn't get much of an opportunity to catch passes for his first season in 3 quarters, but showed down the stretch there at the end that he could be a factor.
Mark asked about Quentin Bell and Cousin Daniels, and I thought that was great. We haven't talked about them a lot, or just overall some of the outside linebacker depth, beyond the top 2 and maybe 3 if you add Anthony Nelson in there.
Yeah, when Larry Foote, the coach for that position, was talking the other day, he was really talking about Anthony Nelson as the number 3 option there behind Shaq and JPP. He says he's the guy. And he said there's about 4 or 5 guys fighting over one bone after that, which the reason he would say that is I think on game days you would normally keep 4 of those guys active. You might keep more than that on the roster, as we did a lot of the time last year. At the end of the year, we had 6 of them on there. I think Bell and Daniels were 2 of them, but they weren't playing a lot. So what he's talking about is the guy that's the 4th man in the rotation who's actually going to be active on game day, probably needs to be able to play on special teams. And and that could get him in the rotation for a certain number of snaps. And both of those guys are just kind of raw talent guys from small schools, guys that are fast, but they really need to show that they got pass rush moves as well. So there's a real opportunity for those guys, but they got to show something. They got to show up here in camp.
Yeah, Quentin Bell is such an interesting story. The fact that he was a wide receiver.
Yeah, right.
I mean, that is not a transition you hear about super often, of a wide receiver to outside linebacker, and he is put on the weight. He looks the part of the outside linebacker.
I guess
now.
he's eating his Wheaties.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine that he ever was a wide receiver. And also,
Right.
fun fact about him, he sounds like James Earl Jones. He has the
No.
deepest voice in the world.
Wow.
And I remember when he first joined the team last year, they did an event at an elementary school, and I hadn't gotten to meet him yet or heard him speak. He introduced himself, and it literally caused a stir in the room that all the kids, everyone in there was like, whoa. And he said he's thinking about learning how to do voiceovers.
I was
going to
say,
because it's such a
after
great
his
voice.
football career, he can be the
he's talking
narrator.
about learning that. So yeah, there's your fun fact for the day about him. This is an interesting one we haven't talked about. Daniel asked, are there any new NFL rules outside of things related to COVID for this year? You know, the way they always kind of reevaluate the different rules.
Yeah.
We haven't talked about this a whole lot.
Yeah, they already were going to give you more spots on the practice squad. Well, here's the big one that was already part of the new CBA that they agreed to in early March, I think. A lot of people thought early on that the NFL had decided to increase their rosters from 53 to 55, which is not the case. It's still 53. But you can effectively make it 55 on a game day anytime you want, because you're allowed to promote 2 guys from the practice squad, and then after the game they revert to the practice squad without having to go through waivers. So you don't have to subject them to the waiver wire and go through that process. And if you bring those 2 guys up, you've got 55 guys, and you can go as high as 48 instead of 46 active on game day, as long as you have 8 offensive linemen active. You know, most teams go 7, and they have the 5 starters and 1 guy to back up in the middle and 1 guy to back up the tackles. And that's usually enough, but every now and then, it doesn't happen often, but usually somewhere around the league every season, a team runs into a problem where they have multiple injuries and they end up having to play like a tight end at right tackle or something like that. So having an 8th offensive lineman is a luxury that most teams usually can't afford on game day because they need that spot for something else. But if you can improve from 46 to 48, you can devote one of those 2 spots to an offensive lineman and then have another guy up for whatever reason you need him for. So that is a rule that's going to be interesting. It's going to involve a lot of guys moving up and down. I should point out that you can only do that with any given player twice in a season, and you can't do it 2 weeks in a row with the same player. So you're going to see a lot of different guys getting cameos. You know, this week this receiver and this OLB come up, and then the next week you bring up a tackle and a kicker or something. You know, so I think that's the most interesting new rule.
Yes, and a different Daniel. We have so many Daniels that are fans of our show. It's like part of the requirement. Different Daniel asked, do you think Tanner Hudson makes the team? And if he doesn't, I hope he gets one of the protected spots on the practice squad.
Yeah, I agree with that. And we asked her this question at the end of last week as well. And it's tough because of the numbers, you know, especially after adding Rob Gronkowski, for goodness sake. You got Gronkowski, Howard, and Brate, and it's hard to imagine them not keeping those 3 guys. So do they keep a 4th? That's certainly an option, and probably a pretty good one considering how many times you're going to play 12 formation with 2 tight ends on the field. But you also have Anthony O'Clair there, and he's a guy that they really treasure for his blocking. And even Cody McElroy is a guy that's got a lot of possibilities, right? He's kind of an interesting athlete, a very versatile guy. He played 2 offensive snaps last year and caught a 30-yard pass, so that's pretty good efficiency right there. 15 yards per snap for him.
Yeah, we'd take that.
So but as I said last week, I just have a feeling that somewhere or another Tanner Hudson is going to be around here, and he's going to get his chance. And so that could involve being on the practice squad if he doesn't get that 4th tight end spot.
Just the same way we talked earlier about how, you know, Ryan Griffin is definitely one of the vets that would be hurt most from not having a preseason because he's tended to do so well in that. Tanner Hudson right up there with him.
He had a huge
that
preseason.
Connection, holy cow. The Griff to Hudson.
Yeah.
It's so much so that the team made T-shirts that look like those political teams of the president, vice president that said Griffin Hudson 2019.
Well, he was the second leading receiver in terms of receiving yards in the entire NFL last year, not just tight ends in the preseason.
That was incredible. All right, another question was, other than speed, what makes a good punt returner?
Do I need to say it again?
Sure.
He has to catch the ball.
Yeah.
I had not our current one, but I had a special teams coach tell me one time that it goes like this. First, you have to catch the ball. Second, you have to show us that you can get it 10 yards. You can catch the ball and at least get 10 yards. And then third, if you can do those 2 things, then you can occasionally break a big one. So obviously what you want first is to avoid negatives. And then if you can avoid negatives but also have a guy that can occasionally pop one for you, that's the dream right there, right? And so it's not just hands, although hands is a big part of it. It's also decision making, deciding when to catch the ball, when to let it go over your head, when it's going to go out of bounds or it's going to bounce and roll for a while. You got to be good at making the decisions on when to catch the ball and when not to risk it, quite frankly, and when you need to call a fair catch. We had a guy in our team history way back when named Danny Reese who would never call a fair catch. He had 222 punt returns in his career and only 7 fair catches, if you can imagine that. It's incredible.
Wow.
Nobody does that these days. And it's great. Hey, great, you were fearless and it was awesome, but you really need to be able to make the good decisions on when to fair catch the ball, because sometimes that's the better move.
Yeah, that's true. All right, well, that's going to do it for us on this edition of Training Camp Live, presented by Publix. Thanks to all of you guys for joining us. Thanks for all those great questions. And here's the deal. We're going to be back every day this week. We had that Saturday day off. It's the same schedule this week so far, unless something changes. They have practice every day until Saturday, so we will be here every morning. Again, unless practice time changes, we'll be here at 8:30 each morning, so tune in then. Get your questions in on YouTube and Facebook. We'll see you next time.